If every teacher that's willing to push back does die on that first hill, the only teachers that are left in future hills are the ones who are not willing to push back. And now your kids are being taught only by those teachers.
When was the first time you heard a student come in and say and ask for their pronouns to be acknowledged?
This is a
Or
funny
has that
story.
happened?
This is a funny story. I had just been accepted to Emerson. I had never heard of pronouns before. I was there for the orientation to find an apartment. And so they were having a meet and greet for find someone to try and live with and we'll help you find an apartment. And for the way the gathering started, everyone got in a circle and they started going around. They're saying, okay, so introduce yourself, where you're from, and your pronouns. And I had never heard of this. And I thought, this is a true story. I don't know, understand what's happening. And I was like the last person to go. And they started going around the circle. And I was trying to figure out what was going on here. Why are they saying they and we? I couldn't figure it out. And I was trying to understand, and I was blanking on what a pronoun, as a teacher, this is embarrassing, what a pronoun was. And when it came to me, I was like, Warren Smith, they, we, like, and everyone looked at me and they were like, and I was like, I genuinely had no idea what I was doing. And that was the first time I'd ever encountered this. And that was my intro to the college.
Wow.
You should put that in your bio on Twitter. They'll love it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like, he's
definitely.
one of us.
I didn't mean to. It was absolutely accidental.
I love that. I'm sure they were like, yeah, they championed you, put you up on a chair like a bar mitzvah over here and raise you around. Dr. Rachel, what about you?
First time, I don't have a fun story like that, but I think the first time I was really hearing about pronouns was because, I went to school for education. I went to become a teacher. So you think, oh, okay, they probably taught us that in the classes. No, wasn't in any of my classes. I didn't hear about it until I started teaching, and I was taking on these course shells. So I'm sure Warren knows this. When you're, like a new college teacher, you're not designing your own classes right away. You're given sort of the course shell from previous teachers, and you sort of adapt it to your own. And I remember like seeing, and it wasn't in the lessons themselves, it was in the intros. So a lot of people would be like, hey, here's icebreaker, introduce yourself to the class. And the times I see it were in those introductions, the teachers, would have an outline of like, what's your name? Where are you from? What are you majoring in? Something interesting about yourself. And then they started putting in pronouns. So students would be asked right away to give their pronouns. And I've always been very much against it. I know a lot of people in my school, teachers and administrators, in their signatures, they put their pronouns in. I don't. I never have. I've been asked to multiple times. I don't do it. But I was noticing that in the introductions and the course shows I was getting. And I decided to run my own little experiment. Because even though I went to my doctorate for teaching, my past degrees were in research. So I decided to do a little experiment. The first, few times I did that, mostly in the past 2 years I was doing this, I just kept the introduction as it was, name, pronouns, etc. And most people would put their pronouns. But in the last year, I started making just, I'm a part-time adjunct instructor. I can barely change a thing in these shells, but I just put in the word optional next to the pronouns. That's it. Just made it optional. So in a class of 25 students, suddenly I would have maybe 3 people putting in their pronouns. So I thought that was really interesting, where when you get to actually having students, do something as an option, they're not putting in their pronouns for the most part.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting. And so I did that this semester, and I'll do that future semesters going forward, just making things optional. So it makes, like that is kind of like going in my mind of like, well, what else are we told that, there's so many they, thems, and, we, whizzes, and whatever the pronouns are.
There's
there's
Your
so many of them
Majesty.
on college campuses, but I'm finding very few of them in my classes. And most of my classes are more like general psychology, very introductory, very those generalized courses that y'all were talking about earlier. So it just got me thinking, do we really have a lot of pronoun students going to college?
Right.
At least to the college that I teach at?
Well, and that's kind of the argument, is that that's not real life. It's not real life, because when you see about, and let's bring this back to video games here. Like, I've been in this industry for almost 20 years at this point, 18 years as of February 15th. Okay. Been working online since literally February 15th, 2006. And I've been to countless gaming conventions. I've been to hundreds of industry events. And what do I see there? Look, you see some people who, for the most part, pretty normal people. Some people who are socially awkward. There are definitely some people who are on the autism scale or autistic or whatever, who are just looking to connect with people. What I don't see is people who have Z-zer pronouns, they, them pronouns. For the most part, it's just regular old people, right? And if you do see those people, like, it's such a small minority of people. And this is in the gaming space. Like, the gaming space is so unbelievably woke. It's insane. And I don't buy that it's real life. I think that for the vast majority of people, it's just, gotta put my pronouns in, and it's just more work, and people don't want more work. When it oh God, I gotta put he, him, she, her, she, they, whatever. People don't like more work. People are lazy, and the idea of making people do more work is stupid. I don't know, Warren. I would love to hear your thoughts.
No, that's sensible. That's it. No, I agree with everything you're saying. Yeah. Take the path of least, whatever's logical. That is logic. Living simple.
I also, and this is just me going off here, just my personal thoughts. I think they're incredibly selfish. I think that they're the most egotistical thing you could possibly do. And if somebody ever applied to work for me and they included their pronouns on their anything, I would not give them a second look. And let me tell you why. Because it shows that it's more about them than it is about the team. And that's the biggest thing. This is how you will talk to me. This is even when I'm not even there, right? This is how you're going to talk about me when I'm not around, in the third person. And that's the biggest thing. If you're looking to build a business, build a team, build a community, it's the last thing that you can do. And people, well, it's my identity, right? Well, yeah, okay, well, you're not here, right? You're not here for me to refer to you as in your pronouns. So it's like, whatever. I'm sorry, Warren, you're going to say something.
No, I try not to. I think what you're saying is, that's the reason I would probably, if it's not absolutely, I'd never utilize it, for the very reason that if someone applies to you, as long as it doesn't become compelled, which we saw in Canada with Bill C-16, as long as if I have a student that wants me to, yes, I am sort of like ethically required to, and I just don't want to be a jerk. I have no problem. I'm not going to make a huge thing out of it, because but that's a face-to-face individual decision between me and them, as long as it never becomes something that's compelled by law. That's the big thing.
It's funny. So T-Todd says, so calling Craig a she wouldn't bother her, huh? Is that supposed to be like, honestly, it doesn't bother me. What it tells me is that you can't tell the difference between a boy and a girl. That's what it tells me. So crazy.
Hold on. Can I just add on something to that?
Yes, of course.
I think is interesting. So I started cosplay in 2014, and I promise this is going to be connected.
Yeah.
I love dressing up as different characters. You see all the stuff behind me, like swords and whatnot I've made. And one of my biggest cosplays I did was Sauron. And most people think of Sauron as a male. So whenever I would dress up as Sauron and go around conventions, obviously I'm a woman, but so much of the body was hidden that, and people know the character, and they just always called me a guy and like, hey Sauron, he's great. Oh, your armor looks amazing, dude, and all the he him pronouns. And I grew up with that before the like I really start to see like the pronouns like we were talking about. And so I never had an issue with it. I'm just like, I mean, you know the character, you know my name. That's what you're primarily identifying me as Sauron. So I'm just glad you got the right character's name. So when I have a student now who like has a name change for legal reasons, or they're in the process of transitioning and they prefer a different name, or they have a nickname or something like that, I'm going to primarily address them as their name. The pronouns, if they really want me to, I address them as they, them. Like Warren said, I don't have an issue with that. If that makes you a bit more comfortable, fine.
How does that work? So sorry, like when you're in a class and let's just really basic, right? And I'm Craig, they, them, right? And you give me a math problem. 2 + 2 = 4. And I go up and is it something to where you say, well, as opposed to I'm just trying to think of how this would play out.
It's a good question. It's a good question. I have encountered that I have encountered somewhere it's they, and you would never refer to them as he, her. It's they, even though it's not plural. So it is easy to slip up, and it is frustrating internally sometimes. Like, why am I doing this? As teachers,
do they run out the door screaming?
I have not had an issue
on accident
in my own. I have not encountered that myself. It's more likely to happen on X or something, but in the classroom, I've never encountered. We have an expectation as teachers to obviously to treat our students with respect, and we do need to accommodate them, which we're held to a different standard than you out in your daily life at a coffee shop. You shouldn't be compelled to do anything, but as professionals, we do have some professional standards to keep in mind. I do have students that were born male and they want to be called she. It's just, I had too many things to deal with in the day. You got to pick your battles, and that's not a battle that's worth fighting at all.
Yeah. Similarly, it's rough. I've had a few slip ups before. I've never had a student run screaming from the room. It's more a calm email after class is over. Be like, hey, by the way, you referred to me as he in class. Can you just refer to me as she going forward? I'm like, it's a respectful email. Fine, I'll do that. In past years, when I've had more classes to teach and a few more students, with specifically name changes. Name changes are a big one because I feel bad if I call someone the wrong name. Whereas wrong pronoun, I'm like, whoops, sorry, I'll get it right next time. But names, I do usually have like sticky notes on my desk. Be like, okay, this class, Alexander, just call Alex, or Charlie, just call Amy. That kind of thing. But yeah, in terms of like what you were asking, Craig, and like with the pronouns, I'd be like, okay, well, we all talked about this math problem, and Warren solved it this way, and he got the correct answer. Blab solved it this way, and she did a really interesting thing here and still got to the right answer. Craig did the problem this way, and they got the right answer. So it's very small things I do, but I usually just refer to my students by their name. That
right.
tends to solve a lot better problems, because there's a lot of people that go by he. And so when I say he, that can refer to a lot of people. But if I say Warren, that's very specific to one student. So I feel like in terms of identity, just I don't know. Like the whole pronoun thing, it's just people think of it as such a big part of their identity, and yet why is it so hard to just go by your name? That's an even better way of classifying a student.
Allow me to push back a little bit here. All right. Your job as a teacher is to educate. And my job as a parent or a friend, I feel like the best thing that you can do is be honest with somebody, right? I have a hard time validating somebody somebody's thoughts on themselves when they can't validate themselves, right? So that's kind of where my line is. You're asking me to validate you when you can't even validate your own thought process, right? Or your own identity. And it's not about, like I said, if you're old enough to if you're 18, you're grown up, fucking hey, do whatever you want. My issue is with children, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that with listen, I honestly could care less how people live as long as you don't tell me how to live my life. But that's where it kind of the gray is for me, is you're telling me to look at you and the guy with the 5 o'clock shadow and call you Amy. Like, I have a hard time with that, because that's clearly not the case. Maybe you are Amy, but I have a hard time. When you can outgrow my beard or my goatee, that's where it's kind of like, yeah, dude, I'm sorry, a person, you know what I mean? That's kind of where. Go ahead, Warren.
Let's game it out though. So then,
sure. Then this is great.
Brandon wants you to call him Amy, and you're in my position, and you're a teacher, and all of those thoughts go through your mind that you just articulated, and then you refuse to do it, and then it becomes a thing. It's taken to your boss, and then you lose your job. I've seen people lose their jobs for equally or less things. And now you still got to pay the bills. So yes, in that moment, I can understand what you're saying, but you got to game these things out.
Right. And with that said, I will say that in our sphere, right, we know, I don't know, half a dozen people who have pushed back, or not even pushed back at all. They've been fired for whatever reason. One girl was fired. One girl was fired for next to nothing. But she was hunted down by one activist on Twitter who complained to the parent company, and they fired her. And a year later, she's living the best life she could possibly live.
That's possible.
And she lands on her feet. And there's a half dozen instances like that where that happens. And I'm a big proponent of, like, if you keep bending and keep bending and keep bending, eventually something's gonna break, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at. And yeah, I understand the idea. Well, you got to pay your bills, right? I get it, right? But you guys have also said that the pendulum is swinging back, right? And the pendulum will swing back, or pronouns not a part of that pendulum.
If teachers, if I understand the sentiment exactly, if every teacher were to die on that first hill, you would have no teachers to then challenge even larger things, like that, the issue of racism, or standing up and saying things that I've been able to say. I would never have had the opportunity to engage in that conversation. That video wouldn't exist had I died on that hill on my first day. Am I making more change now? Is it better for me to, I'm getting that heat now. There are those exact people on X tagging my employer over and over on X, trying to get me fired now. It's just a different battle, a battle that I would not have been able to fight had I died on that first hill.
Right. As Sebastian points out, but that's the problem. If the hurt feelings of a child can get you fired, right? And that's
a problem.
Like, that seems that's a pretty fucking slippery slope, where somebody goes, no, I don't feel this. I don't feel very included or inclusive.
Yeah. But what do I do?
And then somebody loses their career over it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a problem.
Yep. Like you were saying, some people can bounce back, and that's great. And some can't. It's really going to depend on a lot of things. It's going to depend on the person. It's going to depend on how big a scene they vocalize. It's going to depend on the size of the company. Like, if you're a person in a small 10-person company, and you voice your opinions on things and you get fired, maybe it'll spread some talk in that company. Maybe that company will change a lot faster. But if you are a teacher working in an institution where there's thousands of employees and you vocalize something, it's going to be a lot larger group of people that are going to attack you and not stand up for you or stand with you. It's going to be very different based on the situation, but like you're both saying, the pendulum is swinging back. And so I think Warren said it great before with pick your battles, figure out how much you can push back to maybe like not get fired, but you have a platform like this where you can start to vocalize things. You can make videos, you can engage in these conversations in podcasts like this one. So you can start it going. Yeah, you'll receive some pushback, but it's more of a slow process.
If every teacher that's willing to push back does die on that first hill, the only teachers that are left in future hills are the ones who are not willing to push back. And now your kids are being taught only by those teachers.
Yep.
There's never a perfect solution. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. We have to pick the least bad option.